I never thought I'd end up being the kind of guy who steals from a company using a fake employee. Honestly, if you met me back then, you probably would have described me as forgettable. Mid-30s. Quiet. Payroll administrator at a logistics company nobody outside the shipping industry had ever heard of. Divorced, drowning in debt, surviving on vending machine coffee and panic attacks. The company itself was chaos wrapped in fluorescent lighting. Management turnover every 6 months. Audits constantly delayed. HR and accounting hated each other so much they barely communicated except through passive-aggressive emails. If you worked there long enough, you realized something dangerous. Nobody was paying attention. That realization didn't hit me all at once. It happened gradually, like watching rot spread through wood. Little mistakes went unnoticed. Duplicate expense reports. Incorrect overtime entries. People getting paid after quitting because someone forgot to process paperwork. At first, I just noticed it. Then I started thinking about it. The idea came to me one night around 2 a.m. while I was sitting in my apartment staring at overdue bills spread across the kitchen table. Rent notice. Credit card collections. Hospital debt from my mother's surgery. I remember laughing, actual laughing, because the numbers looked impossible. Like some kind of joke. I could work every day for the next 10 years and still drown. That's when I remembered an old conversation with one of the senior accountants. He joked that half the payroll system is held together with duct tape and prayer. I kept thinking about that line. A fictitious employee is a salary for someone who does not exist. Simple concept. Terrifyingly simple. The next morning, I tested something small. I checked how many approvals it took to add a new employee profile into the system. The answer? 1. Just one exhausted HR manager clicking through onboarding forms between meetings. That should have scared me more than it did. Instead, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Opportunity. And once that feeling got inside my head, it started growing like mold. Once the idea settled into my brain, I couldn't stop feeding it. I told myself I was only researching. Just curiosity. Like poking at a loose tooth with your tongue. But every night after work, I started staying late, digging through old payroll records and onboarding files. I learned exactly how careless the system really was. The company had over 400 employees spread across warehouses in 3 states. Turnover was insane. Drivers quit weekly. Seasonal workers came and went constantly. HR processed people so fast they barely checked documentation unless something triggered an alert. That's when Daniel Mercer was born. 38 years old. Forklift certification. Previously employed at a warehouse in Ohio that had conveniently gone bankrupt years earlier. I created everything carefully: tax forms, address history, emergency contacts. Nothing flashy. That's the trick. Fake things become suspicious when they look too perfect. I even made a Gmail account for him and sent fake onboarding emails back and forth during lunch breaks. The strangest part? After a while, Daniel stopped feeling fake to me. He started feeling like insurance. Like survival. And that scared me more than the crime itself. The hardest moment wasn't creating Daniel Mercer. It was pressing submit. People imagine crimes as dramatic moments with alarms or shouting or adrenaline-fueled decisions. Real financial crimes are quieter than that. They happen under fluorescent office lights while someone microwaves leftover pasta in the break room. I submitted Daniel's payroll profile on a Wednesday afternoon at exactly 3:17 p.m. I remember the time because my hands were shaking so badly I had to retype his routing number twice. Then, nothing. No warning email. No verification request. No manager stopping by my desk. Just silence. For 2 weeks, I convinced myself the system would catch it eventually. Every time my phone rang at work, my stomach folded into itself. Every unexpected email notification felt like a bullet headed toward me. Then payday arrived. I logged into the account from my apartment around midnight. $2,346.11. I stared at the screen for nearly 10 minutes without moving. The money looked unreal, like Monopoly cash accidentally deposited into a real account. I should have stopped right there. Instead, I remember smiling. That was the moment I crossed the line for real. After the first paycheck cleared, my fear should have outweighed the excitement. It didn't. That's the dangerous thing nobody tells you about getting away with something illegal. The first success rewires your brain. The impossible suddenly feels manageable. Then normal. Then deserved. Daniel Mercer couldn't just exist on payroll anymore. If anyone casually searched employee records, there had to be traces of a real person behind the name. So I started building him deeper into the company. I assigned him training modules through the internal portal. Safety certifications. Compliance videos nobody actually watched. Every few days I logged into his employee account and completed another course with muted audio while eating dinner. I even created fake scheduling conflicts so supervisors would assume Daniel worked different warehouse shifts. In a company that disorganized, people rarely met everyone face to face. Still, paranoia followed me everywhere. One afternoon, a warehouse manager emailed asking why Daniel never attended a forklift refresher seminar. I nearly threw up reading it. But I calmly replied that he'd transferred temporarily to another location. The manager answered with 2 words. Got it. That terrified me more than suspicion would have. 3 months passed before greed entered the picture. Up until then, I justified everything to myself. I wasn't buying sports cars or luxury watches. I paid off collections, covered rent on time, helped my mother with medication bills without telling her where the money came from. That made it easier to sleep. But eventually, survival stopped being the motive. One Friday afternoon, payroll adjustments for annual raises landed on my desk. Most employees got tiny increases nobody would even notice. While processing them, I saw Daniel's profile sitting there among everyone else's. And a thought slipped into my head so naturally it scared me. Why shouldn't he get a raise too? I remember staring at the screen for a long time, arguing with myself internally. Increasing his salary meant drawing more attention. Larger numbers meant larger risks. But another part of me, the part that had grown stronger each month, kept whispering that nobody cared enough to notice. In the end, I approved a modest increase. Just 40 cents more per hour. Such a tiny decision. But afterward I realized something ugly about myself. I wasn't reacting to desperation anymore. I was optimizing theft. Everything started unraveling because of a single email with the subject line: Quarterly Internal Audit Review. I still remember the exact moment it appeared in my inbox. My chest tightened so fast it felt like somebody had hooked jumper cables directly to my heart. The company rarely performed audits, which was exactly why I'd felt safe. Most reviews were superficial, random spreadsheets, rushed signatures, managers pretending to care while trying to leave early on Fridays. But this one was different. Corporate hired outside consultants. Outside people asked questions. For the next week, the office atmosphere changed completely. Executives suddenly walked around pretending to be involved in operations. HR scrambled to organize employee records that should have been maintained months earlier. Entire filing cabinets were dragged across hallways like evidence before a police raid. And Daniel Mercer was sitting right in the middle of all of it. I barely slept during those days. Every scenario played repeatedly in my head: investigators calling me into a conference room, police waiting beside my desk, coworkers staring while security escorted me out. Then the auditors requested a list of active warehouse employees, including badge activity logs. That's when I realized Daniel had never badged into a building once. Panic makes you creative in terrible ways. The moment I realized Daniel had no badge history, my brain started searching for solutions faster than I could control it. Rational thought disappeared. Survival took over. The company used an ancient access system connected to employee ID numbers. Most records were automated, but older entries could still be manually adjusted by administrators during system corrections. And unfortunately for everyone involved, I was one of those administrators. That weekend I stayed late pretending to help prepare audit documentation. Once the office emptied out, I accessed archive badge logs and started editing entries manually. Tiny details mattered. Too many scans would look suspicious. Too few would raise questions. I scattered Daniel's activity carefully across different warehouses and random shifts. Lunch breaks. Loading dock entries. Early morning arrivals. I even added 2 failed badge attempts because real employees constantly forgot their cards. Around midnight, while modifying timestamps, I heard footsteps outside my office. I nearly stopped breathing. A security guard leaned through the doorway holding a coffee cup and casually asked if I was burning the midnight oil again. I smiled and joked about payroll deadlines. He laughed and walked away. Meanwhile, my shirt was soaked with sweat. The auditors themselves didn't scare me nearly as much as Denise from compliance. Denise had worked at the company forever. Late 50s, sharp eyes, calm voice, the kind of person who noticed details everyone else ignored. She wasn't loud or intimidating, which somehow made her worse. People like that don't need to threaten you. They just quietly connect dots. A few days into the audit, she stopped by my desk holding a printed employee roster. "Quick question," she said casually. "Do you know Daniel Mercer personally?" I felt my pulse slam against my throat. But years of office politics had taught me something useful. Answering too quickly makes people suspicious. So I frowned slightly, pretending to think. "Warehouse transfer, right?" I said. "I've only handled his payroll." She nodded slowly, but her expression didn't change. "Strange," she muttered. "Nobody seems to know him." Then she smiled politely and walked away. That sentence haunted me for days. Nobody seems to know him. After that conversation, every normal interaction felt dangerous. Every coworker glance became loaded with meaning. I started avoiding break rooms and eating lunch alone in my car. Guilt changes the way you interpret the world. Every fraud collapses eventually. Not because criminals suddenly grow consciences, but because human beings get tired. And tired people make mistakes. Mine happened on a Thursday evening after nearly 16 straight hours at the office. Payroll deadlines, audit pressure, nonstop questions from management. My brain felt cooked. I was exhausted enough to stop thinking carefully. While processing direct deposits, I accidentally transferred Daniel's paycheck into the wrong account. My personal account. I didn't notice until the next morning. The second I saw the transaction history, cold panic flooded through me so hard my hands went numb. Usually Daniel's payments moved through layered transfers before reaching me. That separation was the only thing making the scheme remotely defensible if anyone investigated. Now there was a direct connection. A straight line from the ghost employee to William Harper. I spent the entire morning trying to reverse the transaction quietly, but accounting systems leave trails for everything. Corrections generate timestamps. User IDs. Approval requests. And unfortunately, Denise from compliance emailed me less than an hour later asking why a payroll adjustment had been manually overridden overnight. That was the first moment I genuinely considered disappearing. Once Denise noticed the override, the entire situation changed. Before that, I'd still convinced myself there was room to escape. Maybe the audit would stay superficial. Maybe nobody would connect the dots completely. But now someone was actively looking in the right direction. So I did what desperate people always do. I made things worse. I started altering records everywhere. Email timestamps. Payroll notes. Access logs. Tiny edits meant to create confusion if someone reviewed the system later. At the time, it felt smart, like building smoke around a fire. In reality, I was leaving fingerprints on everything. The worst part was how normal I acted during the day. I attended meetings. Joked with coworkers. Helped a new employee reset her password while internally imagining federal agents walking through the office doors. One night, I even stayed after hours to delete archived messages connected to Daniel's onboarding. While searching old records, I found something unexpected. A complaint submitted months earlier by a warehouse supervisor asking why Daniel never appeared on shift schedules. The ticket had been marked resolved by me. Seeing my own name attached to it made my stomach drop. I suddenly realized how long I'd been covering this up without even noticing anymore. The meeting invite arrived Monday morning at 8:12 a.m. Conference Room B, attendance required. No explanation. Just my name, Denise's name, 2 executives from finance, and someone from corporate security I'd never met before. The second I saw it, I knew the game was over. It's strange how the body reacts when certainty replaces fear. For weeks I'd been anxious, paranoid, barely functioning. But that morning, walking toward the conference room, I felt almost calm. Like my brain had finally accepted the crash after spending months bracing for impact. The room itself looked painfully ordinary. Cheap coffee. Gray walls. A projector humming quietly. Denise spoke first. "William, we've identified inconsistencies involving employee records connected to Daniel Mercer." Even hearing the name out loud made my chest tighten. I tried denying everything initially. Reflex more than strategy. I blamed system errors, outdated software, payroll migration issues. But then corporate security slid a folder across the table. Bank records. Badge edits. Login histories. Every move I had made was sitting there printed in black ink. And the worst part? Nobody looked angry. They looked disappointed. I confessed about 40 minutes into the meeting. Not because I wanted to be honest, but because denial became impossible. Every explanation collapsed under evidence I didn't even realize existed. Login timestamps. IP records. Financial transfers. They had reconstructed almost the entire scheme before calling me into that room. Once I stopped lying, something inside me cracked open. I told them everything. How Daniel Mercer was created. How the payroll system failed. How the fake badge logs were edited during the audit. I even admitted things they hadn't discovered yet, which shocked the investigators more than the fraud itself. One executive actually asked, "Why would you volunteer that information?" I didn't know how to answer. Maybe because carrying the lie had become heavier than the consequences. The strange thing is, nobody yelled. There were no dramatic accusations or threats. Just quiet questions and exhausted faces. Corporate fraud apparently happens more often than people think. When the interview ended, security escorted me back to my desk to collect my belongings. Coworkers pretended not to stare. That hurt worse than open judgment would have. Shame feels enormous in silent rooms. After I was fired, life became a long stretch of waiting. Waiting for charges. Waiting for court dates. Waiting for phone calls from lawyers I couldn't afford. Every unknown number made my pulse spike. Every knock at my apartment door felt catastrophic. The company eventually filed criminal fraud charges, but because I cooperated fully and confessed early, the prosecutors pushed for a financial settlement and reduced penalties instead of immediate prison time. That sounds lucky until you realize your entire life still collapses around you. Friends disappeared quietly. My mother stopped asking questions after seeing my face on a local business news site. The humiliation in her eyes nearly destroyed me. Not anger, disappointment. That's always worse. I took temporary warehouse jobs under contract agencies just to survive, which felt almost poetic considering the fake employee I invented had supposedly worked warehouses too. At night, I replayed every decision repeatedly, trying to pinpoint the exact moment I became capable of this. But crimes like mine don't happen in one moment. They grow slowly. Tiny compromises. Small justifications. Little lies repeated until they stop sounding like lies at all. People hear about financial crimes and assume the worst consequence is getting caught. It isn't. The real punishment is realizing how easily you changed yourself while convincing yourself you hadn't changed at all. Before Daniel Mercer, I used to think criminals were obvious people, reckless, greedy, immoral from the beginning. But that's not how it happened to me. I crossed the line one rationalization at a time. First survival, then comfort, then entitlement. That progression terrifies me now. Even after everything collapsed, part of me still tried defending what I'd done. I'd think about hospital bills or debt collectors and tell myself the company practically invited fraud through negligence. And maybe there's truth in that. But eventually I had to face something uglier. I enjoyed beating the system. The secrecy. The control. The feeling of getting away with something invisible. That's the part I'm most ashamed of. Because once the fear faded, I stopped seeing Daniel as emergency money. He became proof that I was smarter than everyone around me. Arrogance turns ordinary people dangerous faster than desperation ever does. It's been 4 years since everything fell apart. I still work low-level administrative jobs because financial fraud stays attached to your name like smoke on clothing. Employers smile during interviews until background checks come back. Then suddenly the position isn't available anymore. I can't really blame them. Sometimes people online ask whether I regret it. The honest answer is complicated. I regret the damage. I regret humiliating my family. I regret becoming someone who could look coworkers in the eye while stealing beside them every day. But I also understand exactly how I ended up there, and that understanding scares me more than prison ever could have. Most people think morality is a solid wall. It isn't. It's erosion. You compromise once because you're desperate. Then again because nothing bad happened the first time. Eventually you wake up defending things you once swore you'd never do. So if anyone reading this feels trapped financially, angry at the world, convinced they've found a harmless loophole, walk away early. The money disappears fast. But becoming a stranger to yourself lasts much longer.